In today's video, we're diving into the 6 most dumb Karen deaths ever recorded. From a Karen ignoring rangers at Yellowstone to get the perfect photo, to a Karen road raging her way straight into a canal in the craziest way possible. It was July 18, 2015. The morning air at Yellowstone National Park carried the sharp, sulfuric smell of thermal activity, while tourists gathered along the boardwalks surrounding the geyser bay. Kylie Matthews, a 37-year-old stay-at-home mother from Cheyenne, Wyoming, lingered near the protective barrier with her phone ring, visibly frustrated that the angle wasn't working. Kylie was a normal mother who enjoyed capturing family memories in nature, often taking photos during outing. Friends and family described her as eager to get good shots, sometimes prioritizing pictures over her own safety. She posted pictures daily, often dismissing safety warnings as overreactions by other people who didn't understand. That morning, she had already complained to multiple rangers about restrictive barriers blocking. Yellowstone's thermal features form when superheated water rises through volcanic rock, dissolving mineral fragile crusts around. These crusts appear stable, but often are less, supported only by pressure. Park regulations require visitors on designated as the ground test inches beneath the surface can. Warning signs posted every explicitly state that step marked can result in. That morning, Kylie had received 3 separate warnings from park rangers about approaching thermal features too closely. She openly dismissed them to nearby tourists, stating that rangers exaggerated dangers to justify their jobs. Her 2 children, ages 8 and 10, remained safely positioned on the boardwalk approximately 40 feet behind her. Multiple witnesses later reported she seemed determined to capture a specific showing both the thermal pool and mountain backdrop. At approximately 10:15 in the morning, Kylie climbed over the wooden barrier rail, which was approximately waist-high. Despite shouted warnings from at least 6 witnesses, she walked roughly 15 feet onto the mineral crust, testing each step briefly before continuing. Her phone remained extended as she adjusted her position, apparently reviewing the framing. The crust showed no immediate signs of weakness. Moments later, the ground collapsed beneath her left foot. The mineral shelf gave way instantly, plunging Kylie into the thermal pool with no time to grab surrounding terrain. She dropped approximately 6 feet into water measuring 205 degrees Fahrenheit with a pH of 3.5, strongly acidic and capable of causing chemical burns. Her screams lasted roughly a few seconds before abruptly stopping, as reported by witnesses. The boiling acidic water caused immediate catastrophic tissue. Her synthetic athletic clothing was compromised by heat and adhered to areas of severe burns. Third-degree burns covered her face, torso, and limbs almost instantly, causing the outer skin layers to char black while deeper tissue necrosis developed rapidly. The extreme heat triggered immediate shock, leading to rapid cardiovascular collapse. Witnesses described seeing her body convulse once before becoming submerged or down. Park rangers arrived immediately, following the screams, but could not attempt rescue due to the lethal water temperature and unstable ground conditions. Her children remained on the boardwalk, physically restrained by other tourists. Recovery operations began 3 hours later after hazard assessment and careful approach to the unstable terrain. Her remains were chemically degraded, leaving them fragmented and severely disfigured. The medical examiner determined death resulted from thermal and chemical burns affecting over 70% of body surface area. Park authorities reinforced barrier systems throughout the thermal basin following the incident. Kylie's ex-husband deleted all social media accounts within 1 week and declined media interviews. It was September 3rd, 2016. The afternoon sun beat down on a private hiking trail near Sedona, casting sharp shadows across the red rock formations. Linda Levine, a 44-year-old realist in the Verde Valley, was at the edge of a steep ravine, her attention fixed on stray dog wandering near the sandstone cliff edge. Linda had built a successful career selling residential properties throughout the Verde Valley, known equally for her persistence and her habit of inserting herself into situations uninvited. Colleagues at her brokerage described her as someone who genuinely believed was helping, even when explicitly told to stop. Friends and family saw a pattern of public confrontations with strangers she deemed irresponsible, from parking violations to dog owners she felt weren't controlling their pets properly. The ravine system near Sedona features steep canyon walls composed of layers of weathered sandstone and limestone, carved over millennia by seasonal water flow. The rock formations are notoriously unstable, particularly along cliff edges where thin, undercut veneers of sandstone and loose sediment aid deceptive footing. Park officials had posted multiple warnings about the specific trail Linda was hiking, noting recent rock slides and deteriorating path edges. The area's jagged rock formations, some jutting up like natural spears from the canyon floor, made any fall potentially catastrophic. That afternoon, Linda encountered a group of local hikers who regularly fed the stray dog. When Red wandered near the ravine edge, approximately 30 feet from the trail, Linda immediately announced she would rescue it. The locals insisted the dog navigated the terrain regularly and would return on its own. Linda responded by loudly criticizing them for their negligence, calling them irresponsible for allowing a dog near dangerous terrain. When they warned her about the unstable sandstone layer extending 10 feet from the visible cliff edge, she dismissed their concerns entirely. Multiple hikers attempted to physically stop her, but Linda pushed past them, focused solely on reaching the dog. She stepped beyond the warning markers, moving across loose rock that shifted visibly beneath her boots. The dog, sensing her approach, moved closer to the ravine edge. Linda followed, now 25 feet from stable ground, standing on a section of trail that had been marked as structurally compromised just weeks earlier. A dry crack ran along the ledge as she advanced. The sandstone gave way. Linda's right foot punched through the surface layer, destabilizing the entire section of cliff edge. She grabbed for Red instinctively as she fell, both tumbling 25 feet into the narrow canyon below, rotating in the air and striking the rock floor. Linda landed on top of Red, both bodies impacting a cluster of jagged limestone formations. Multiple rock spires gouged her clothing and caused deep lacerations with heavy bleeding. Witnesses at the rim saw her still form and torn clothing. Blood spread rapidly across the pale rock as her body convulsed briefly before going still. One hiker immediately called emergency services while others descended using established routes. First responders arrived within 35 minutes but could not access the ravine floor safely. Rescue teams rigged a lowering because the ravine was too narrow, and rescue teams confirmed that both Linda and Red had died on the autopsy. Multiple penetrating injuries to thoraco-abdominal organs and rapid exsanguination, consistent with blunt force trauma, compression pinned against rock. Trail access was temporarily closed, while Sedona Park officials reinforced warning signage. The incident circulated widely on regional hiking as an example of ignoring local experts and posted warnings. It was March 12, 2017. The Dubai desert stretched endlessly under a cloudless afternoon sky, the sand dunes glowing golden in temperatures reaching 95 degrees. Stephanie Bardot, a 34-year-old luxury lifestyle consultant, stood beside a dune buggy, a popular desert safari insisting she could handle the despite never having driven one. Stephanie had built a career advising clients on exclusive experiences and high-end travel. She worked for an international luxury concierge service, coordinating everything from private yacht charters, VIP access. Colleagues described her as demanding, dismissive of standard, frequently citing her client to override staff recommendations. That afternoon, Stephanie had booked a group desert safari tour that included guided dune buggy rides with mandatory safety briefing. Tour staff explicitly explained that all rides required either tandem seating with instructor or close supervision on marked flat routes. The compound had strict policies prohibiting solo rides for first-time operators, especially in the challenging dune formations surrounding the facility. Multiple staff members informed staff requirements. Dune buggies are designed for desert driving, notoriously unstable, deep sand where soft terrain 30 to 8 rollover. Stephanie immediately demanded solo access to a dune buggy, citing her status as a luxury consultant and insisting she was capable of anything. When staff refused, she became increasingly aggressive, threatening negative reviews and claiming connection to tour operators' corporate management. After 20 minutes of escalated confrontation, the exhausted staff reluctantly authorized a solo on the condition she stay on marked. Stephanie refused the technician's offer of a 4-point harness and never tightened the lap belts, signed a liability waiver without reading it, and climbed into the vehicle. Within minutes, Stephanie veered off the designated flat route and accelerated toward the steep competition dunes used for professional racing events. Staff members shouted warnings over radio communication, but she ignored them completely. Video footage from another tourist's phone, combined with the compound's CCTV and GPS telemetry logs, showed her buggy climbing a very steep dune at excessive speed, the wheels churning and the buggy losing traction as it crested. She was partially ejected as the buggy rolled, and the chassis came to rest across her torso because she had refused the harness. The staff spotted the flip and called emergency services immediately. They rushed to the scene but found the buggy had sunk into soft sand, making it impossible to lift without mechanical assistance. Stephanie remained struggling to breathe as full weight compressed her. Her face turned blue-gray as rescuers worked desperately to dig around the frame using shovels and secure inches from the pounds on recovery. A recovery truck arrived on site minutes later and, after rigging a winch, successfully lifted the buggy. Paramedics found Stephanie unresponsive with obvious chest deformities and no pulse, Despite immediate CPR and emergency transport to a regional trauma center, she was pronounced dead at 4:50. The autopsy showed that Stephanie had several broken ribs, collapsed lungs on both sides, bruised lung, a torn liver, and massive internal in her abdomen. The crushing injuries caused her to stop breathing and go into shock. Stephanie's parents were devastated, arriving from Paris to confront staff and grieve privately, later holding a small, low-profile memorial for their daughter. The Desert Safari Company faced immediate consequences as several clients canceled reservations after news of the accident spread, with management reporting a notable drop in bookings directly tied to concerns over safety enforcement. It was June 22, 2015. The lobby of a mid-tier business hotel in Orlando, Florida, gleamed with polished Italian marble flooring. The afternoon heat had driven guests inside, where air conditioning battled the humidity that construction workers tracked in pool renovation. Cynthia Moraes, a 46-year-old regional for a national pharmaceutical distribution, had built her career on aggressive negotiation and an unwavering belief in her own importance. Her performance reviews consistently noted her results-driven approach, though human resources had fielded 17 complaints about her treatment of subordinate and service staff over 3 years. They described her as someone who viewed courtesy as weakness and compromise as failure. Her management style relied heavily on public confrontation and escalating situations until she received preferential treatment. That afternoon, Cynthia arrived expecting immediate processing despite holding a standard reservation. The front desk clerk explained that her room would be ready within minutes and asked her to wait briefly while they completed final preparation. The 3-minute delay triggered an explosive response. Hotel check-in procedures typically require 5 to 8 minutes during busy periods, a time frame Cynthia found unacceptable. She demanded an immediate upgrade, her voice escalating as other guests watched uncomfortably. The housekeeping supervisor had placed multiple wet floor signs along the marble pathway leading from the entrance to the front desk, clearly visible barriers that most guests navigated carefully. Cynthia ignored them entirely, focused on her confrontation with increasingly uncomfortable staff member. She grabbed an oversized luggage cart, maneuvering it aggressively through the lobby while continuing her tirade about unacceptable service standards. The cart's front wheel caught in a seam between marble tiles, causing a sudden backward pull. Her leather-soled stiletto heels found no traction on the water-slicked marble. She stepped directly into a wet section, her momentum carrying her forward as both feet lost purchase simultaneously. The heavy luggage cart offered no stability as she fell backward, her body twisting as she attempted to catch herself. Cynthia struck a protruding granite counter ledge roughly 42 inches high with the back of her head at full falling velocity. The impact was devastating. Witnesses heard a heavy thud against the counter, and a long scalp laceration along the occiput produced visible blood pooling on the marble. Unconsciousness came in. Her breathing was shallow and irregular, showing clear signs of severe neurological trauma. The front desk clerk activated emergency protocols within seconds, calling emergency services immediately. 2 hotel guests with medical training attempted jaw thrust maneuvers, applied direct pressure to the scalp wound, delivered supplemental oxygen, and held manual cervical stabilization. EMS arrived, though the severity of it largely. Paramedics arrived 12 minutes, finding Cynthia unresponsive, obvious skull fracture, and massive. She was transported to a regional trauma center, intubated en route, but never regained consciousness. The medical examiner determined death resulted from severe blunt force trauma, causing a basilar skull fracture, subdural hematoma, and catastrophic brain swelling. Hotel management reviewed security footage confirming Cynthia had bypassed 4 separate wet floor warnings before the accident. Staff members from other hotels reported her history of similar confrontational behavior to be a stay. Her funeral 3 days later drew a modest, primarily colleagues fulfilling professional obligations rather than personal connections formed through years of caustic. It was November 8th. 2004. Central Paris buzzed with evening activity as restaurants and bars filled with locals and tourists seeking views from the city's many rooftop establishments. The temperature hovered around 48 degrees Fahrenheit, typical for early November, with clear skies offering unobstructed views of the illuminated Eiffel Tower in the distance. Monique Lefebvre, a 38-year-old marketing executive for a mid-sized advertising firm, had built a reputation in Parisian social circles for her confrontational behavior at upscale establishments. Colleagues described her as competent professionally but increasingly volatile in social, particularly after drinking. She'd been escorted from multiple venues over the past year for arguing with staff and other patrons. Friends noted she seemed compelled to prove herself in situations where backing down would have been reasonable, often escalating minor disagreements into public scenes. That evening, Monique had attended a client dinner at a restaurant 3 blocks from the rooftop venue where she would later visit. Staff at the dinner noted she consumed at least 4 glasses of wine during the 2-hour meal, her speech becoming noticeably slurred. She'd mentioned wanting to visit a specific rooftop bar known for its panoramic city views, convincing 2 colleagues to accompany her despite their concern her visible intoxication. The trio arrived at the upscale rooftop establishment around 9:45. The venue, located on the 5th floor of a historic building, featured a wraparound terrace with a metal guardrail whose top rail stood about 3.5 feet above the terrace floor and included a lower horizontal mid-rail and a shallow foot ledge that made footholds possible. The host immediately assessed Monique's condition and politely refused service, citing the establishment's policy regarding intoxicated patrons. Monique became belligerent, insisting she was fine and demanding to speak with management. Witnesses saw Monique arguing with staff for nearly 10 minutes while her colleagues attempted to persuade her to leave. The manager arrived and repeated the service refusal. Rather than accepting the decision, Monique turned toward the terrace railing, announcing she would prove she wasn't too drunk by demonstrating her balance. Staff attempted calm restraint at arm's length and called for security. Monique began climbing over the safety barrier, placing one foot on the lower mid-rail while gripping the top. Multiple witnesses, including her colleagues and restaurant patrons, shouted warnings as she swung her second leg over. For approximately 3 seconds, she balanced awkwardly on the exterior side of the railing, facing inward toward the restaurant. Then her hands slipped from the metal railing. Monique fell backward into the open air, dropping 5 stories before striking a lower terrace approximately 55 feet. Her body hit concrete flooring and metal outdoor furniture with devastating. The impact was visible to several dozen people dining on adjacent. She landed on her back and side, her body immediately. A restaurant manager from the lower terrace called emergency services in 30 seconds. Paramedics arrived about 8 minutes after the call, but could only pronounce Monique dead at the scene. The medical examiner's report documented multiple spinal fractures, 14 broken ribs, a shattered pelvis, severe skull fracture, and massive internal bleeding from lacerated liver and spleen. The establishment's security footage was reviewed by police and insurance investigators, confirming witness account. Management implemented stricter intoxication screening protocols and installed additional signage warning patrons about climbing on railing. Monique's colleagues later spoke publicly about her pattern of refusing to accept reasonable safety, describing the incident as tragically predictable in her history of escalation. It was August 14, 2013. The afternoon heat settled thick over a residential neighborhood in Queens, New York, where a parking dispute outside a small shopping plaza would end in a way no one anticipated. Deborah Hines was a 44-year-old real estate agent working for a mid-sized property management in the borough. She had built a reputation over 12 years for closing deals aggressively and maintaining a demanding schedule that left little room for her. Driving record reflected 3 citations for aggressive driving and multiple complaints filed by other motorists, and at least 2 documented road rage incidents where police issued warning. Friends described her as fiercely independent but increasingly confrontational in public, particularly she felt disrespected. Real estate work in Queens required constant mobility between properties, often involving tight parking situations and competitive use of limited street space. Deborah drove a heavy SUV, which friends say she treated as an extension of her professional image and personal territory. The vehicle's size likely gave her confidence in traffic confrontations, and she had been known to use it intimidatingly during disputes, inching aggressively toward other cars or blocking driveways. That afternoon, Deborah arrived at a strip mall to meet a potential client. Another driver, a local resident, had just pulled into a spot Deborah believed she had been waiting for. Words were exchanged through car windows. The other driver refused to move, citing that they had reached the spot first. Witnesses reported Deborah becoming visibly agitated, gesturing angrily and revving her engine. Rather than finding another space in the half-empty lot, Deborah threw her SUV into reverse. Several bystanders standing near the plaza entrance stepped back slightly, but called out warnings as her vehicle accelerated backward faster than necessary. Posted signs clearly marked the canal's proximity, and the faded yellow parking blocks were visible behind her. She seemed to have ignored both the warnings and the physical barriers, and was likely focused entirely on her foot pressed harder on the accelerator. The SUV jumped the low concrete barrier and snapped through the weakened guardrail. The rear wheels left pavement, and the vehicle's momentum carried it over the edge. The front end lifted briefly before the entire SUV tipped backward the canal with a heavy splash that sent water across the parking lot. The canal measured 8 to 10 feet deep at that section, its murky water filling the vehicle within 10 to 15 seconds. Witnesses watched Deborah struggle inside, her hands striking the windows as the SUV sank rear first, and settled at a steep angle. The water pressure made door operation nearly impossible. She managed to partially lower the driver's window but could not squeeze through before the cabin flooded completely. Fire department dive teams arrived within 9 minutes following a bystander's call. By then, the SUV sat fully submerged, only its front hood visible above the waterline. Divers extracted Deborah's body several minutes later. Resuscitation attempts at the scene proved unsuccessful. The medical examiner determined drowning as the primary. Water was present in lung tissue. Secondary injuries included fractured ribs and severe bruising across the chest and limbs, consistent with violent impact against the steering wheel and door frame during the vehicle's descent and struggle. Deborah's estate entered lengthy insurance dispute, with carriers citing reckless operation. Her death became a case study in regional traffic safety reports, documenting aggressive driving consequences. Witness statements provided consistent accounts of the incident. Thanks for watching. If you like these stories, click here.